All right, let's talk about one of the most famous rivalries in history, Tesla versus Edison. We all think we know the story, don't we? You've got Nikola Tesla, this brilliant, ahead of his time genius, and then you've got Thomas Edison, the greedy corporate bad guy who supposedly stole his ideas. It's the classic David and Goliath story. Except, what if I told you that, other than the part about Tesla being an absolute genius, pretty much everything else in that story is, well, just not true? Yeah, that popular internet narrative of the visionary genius getting crushed by the corporate thief. It makes for a great story, but the reality is so much more complicated and honestly way more fascinating. So let's dig in and separate the myth from the man. First up, let's tackle the very idea that these two were locked in some kind of bitter personal feud for their entire careers. The absolute heart of this whole feud myth really boils down to one legendary story. You've probably heard it. It's the moment Edison supposedly cheated Tesla out of a life-changing amount of money. So the story goes like this. Tesla's a young, bright-eyed engineer working for Edison. Edison himself supposedly promises him a $50,000 bonus. That's like $2 million bucks today if he can fix his inefficient dynamo designs. Tesla, being Tesla, works day and night and pulls it off. But when he goes to collect, Edison just laughs in his face and says, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." And bam! A furious Tesla quits right there on the spot. It's the perfect villain origin story. But here's where the legend starts to fall apart. These are Tesla's own words from his autobiography. And notice who he says promised him the money? His manager, not Thomas Edison. That whole iconic American humor line, it seems to have been added to the story years later. Tesla never actually mentioned it himself. And here is maybe the biggest tell. You think getting cheated out of $2 million and quitting your job in a rage would be a pretty big deal, right? Something you'd definitely write down. Well, there is absolutely no mention of it in his personal journal from that time. The only thing he wrote about leaving was a simple, forward entry. Goodbye to the Edison Machine Works. That's it. It's a surprisingly quiet exit for someone who was supposedly betrayed so badly. But if you need the one piece of evidence that really torpedoes the whole bitter feud idea, it comes from 1895. Tesla's New York lab, his life's work, tragically burned to the ground. It was a complete catastrophe for him. And you know who was one of the first people to step up and offer help? Thomas Edison. He offered Tesla free, unlimited use of his own private workshop to rebuild. I mean, come on, that is an act of pure professional respect and generosity. That is not something your arch nemesis does. Okay, so if there was no big personal feud, then what about the famous War of Currents? Surely that was a head-to-head battle, right? Well, the way we hear it today, it sounds like a scientific duel to the death between Tesla's amazing alternating current, or AC, and Edison's old-school direct current, DC. But the reality is, this was a corporate war between two massive companies. George Westinghouse, who had bought Tesla's patents, and Edison's company, which, you might have heard of it, it went on to become General Electric. Tesla was the brilliant mind behind the tech, but he wasn't really a general in this particular war. And that actually brings up an even more fundamental question. We always connect AC power directly to Tesla, but did he actually invent it from scratch? The answer is not really. You see, AC wasn't a single invention that just appeared out of nowhere. It was an evolution. Guys like Michael Faraday were figuring out the basic principles way back in the 1830s. And by the 1880s, people like William Stanley were already building full AC systems. What Tesla did in 1888, and this was absolutely revolutionary, was invent the first practical and efficient AC motor. It was the crucial missing piece of the puzzle that finally made large-scale AC power possible and useful for everyone. All of this really feeds into this wider myth we have of Tesla as this lone, misunderstood genius. This idea that he was constantly coming up with these incredible ideas that were either stolen or just ignored by the establishment. So let's take the radar myth. The story is that Tesla invented radar during World War I, but a naval board that Edison was on shot it down. The thing is, the basic idea of using radio waves to find things had already been demonstrated by Heinrich Hertz decades before. Tesla's specific idea was to use it underwater, but radio waves don't travel well through water. The board rejected it not because they had a grudge, but because the science just wasn't feasible. And then, of course, there's the famous earthquake machine, a little pocket-sized device that Tesla claimed almost shook his entire building to rubble. It's an amazing, dramatic story, but it's a story he told when he was 79 years old, looking back. And every time modern engineers, even the team on Mythbusters, have tried to replicate it, they've completely failed to create anything even close to an earthquake. So, if we strip away all these myths, what are we really left with? Let's take a quick look at the actual complex legacies of these two incredible innovators. One of the biggest numbers you see thrown around online is that Tesla had over 700 inventions or patents. But where does that number actually come from? And is it accurate? First, we have to get something straight, and this is really important. There's a big difference between an invention and a patent. An invention can be just an idea. A patent is a very specific legal document that protects that idea and allows you to commercialize it. They are not the same thing. So, the actual number, when you count up all the research from patent archives all over the world, is 287. That's how many patents Tesla was granted in 26 different countries. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a staggering number and a testament to his incredible mind, but it's a very long way from 700. And if we narrow it down and just look at patents here in the US, the picture gets even clearer. Tesla held 112. Thomas Edison, 1,093. Now, this doesn't mean Edison was 10 times smarter, not at all. It just shows they had completely different goals. Edison's mission was to turn invention into an industry. And that's really the true story here. This wasn't a battle of good versus evil. It was a contrast between two totally different kinds of genius. Tesla was the visionary, the brilliant futurist who could see decades ahead, but often had a hard time turning those grand visions into things people could actually buy and use. Edison, on the other hand, was the industrialist, a master of methodical improvement, the guy who perfected the modern research and development lab and was an expert at building the entire systems that powered our world. And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. After Edison passed away, Tesla himself wrote this tribute. He praised Edison's great genius and undying achievements. Those are words of deep, profound professional respect. They are not the words of a man who felt he'd been wronged by a lifelong enemy. So the real question isn't who won, Tesla or Edison. It's about what kind of innovation truly changes the world. Is it the brilliant visionary who dreams up a future we can't even imagine? Or is it the methodical industrialist who patiently builds that future piece by practical piece? The truth is, you probably need both. Thanks for watching.